It's wonderful to see you all again. I've got an extraordinary tale to tell you today.
Felicity Fay Mercer froze as she read the message from Joanna Thorne on her husband's glowing nightstand. The screen of the sleek smartphone pulsed in the pre-dawn shadows of their penthouse, casting a clinical blue light over the silk sheets she had ironed herself. Last night was incredible. He still has no idea about the offshore accounts, does he? See you at the briefing, my love. The words felt like a physical blow, a sharp serrated edge cutting through the fog of her morning routine. For 5 years, Faye had been the silent engine behind Ashley Brown. She was the meticulous project coordinator who smoothed over his erratic temper and organized his chaotic brilliance into something the board could digest. She had been his wife, his partner, and, as the message clearly indicated, his greatest fool. A heavy silence filled the room, broken only by the rhythmic, entitled hum of the designer air purifier. She looked at Ashley, who was still asleep, his face a mask of boyish innocence that no longer fooled her. The scent of his expensive sandalwood cologne, a bottle that cost more than her first car, clung to the duvet. It was mixed with something else, a cloying, floral note of lilies that didn't belong to her. She didn't scream. She didn't wake him up in a fit of righteous fury. Instead, Faye felt a cold, crystalline clarity settle over her. She reached out, her fingers steady as she took a photo of the screen with her own phone. The sleeping lion wasn't just a nickname her father had given her because of her quiet nature. It was a warning. "Faye, why are you sitting in the dark?" Ashley stirred, propping himself up on one elbow. He didn't look guilty, he looked annoyed. He reached for his phone, sliding it under his pillow with a practiced, casual motion that made her stomach turn. "Just thinking about the quarterly briefing," she said, her voice a level, practiced mask. He chuckled, a dismissive sound that grated against her nerves. "Don't hurt your head, babe. Just make sure the slides are formatted correctly. Joanna Thorne is expecting a flawless presentation, and I can't have you embarrassing me in front of the COO today. Marcus Reed is looking for reasons to trim the fat, and you know how meticulous you need to be to keep up with us." He stood up, heading toward the ensuite bathroom without a second glance at her. He stopped at the door, gesturing toward his closet. "The blue Italian silk shirt, Faye, and make sure the cufflinks are the platinum ones. I need to look like the man who just secured the Thorne merger, not the man who's married to a glorified secretary." The audacity of his words hung in the air like smoke. He hadn't just betrayed their marriage. He was actively planning to steal the credit for the merger she had spent 18 months architecting. Faye watched his silhouette through the frosted glass of the shower. The rage was there, a hot coal in her chest, but she dampened it with the cold water of strategy. 2 hours later, the marble lobby of Thorne and Associates felt like a cathedral of corporate arrogance. The squeak of Ashley's expensive leather shoes echoed off the high ceilings as he strode toward the elevators. He didn't hold the door for her. He stood at the center of the car, checking his reflection in the polished brass, adjusting his tie with the casual confidence of a man who had never been told no. "Remember," Ashley said, as the elevator climbed toward the executive floor. "Keep your mouth shut unless I ask you for a specific data point. Joanna likes a tight ship. She doesn't have time for your helpful suggestions." The doors opened, and they were met by Joanna Thorne herself. The CEO was a vision of sharp angles and expensive tailoring, her eyes like chips of ice as they landed on Faye. The smell of lilies was unmistakable now. It was the same scent that had been on Ashley's pillow. "Ashley, darling," Joanna said, her voice dripping with a professional intimacy that made Faye's skin crawl. "And Felicity, I see you've brought the files." "Every single one," Ashley said, stepping forward to kiss Joanna's cheek, a move that was just a second too long to be purely professional. "Faye spent all night polishing the projections I developed. She's quite the little worker bee when she has the right direction." Joanna smirked, her gaze raking over Faye's modest, charcoal gray suit. "It's important to know one's place in the ecosystem, isn't it? Some are born to lead, and others are born to support that leadership." They moved into the boardroom, where Marcus Reed was already seated. The COO was a man who looked like he was carved from granite, his presence commanding the room. He didn't look up from his tablet as they entered. "Let's get started," Marcus said, his voice a low rumble. "This merger represents a 40% shift in our portfolio. I want to see the architecture behind the acquisition." Ashley stepped to the head of the table, clicking the remote for the projector. He began to speak, his voice smooth and rehearsed. He used the word "I" like a weapon. I identified the weakness. I negotiated the terms. I restructured the debt. Fay sat in the corner, her laptop open. She watched as Ashley displayed the slides she had built, the data she had mined, and the strategy she had perfected. Beside him, Joanna nodded encouragingly, her hand resting briefly on Ashley's shoulder as if to claim him in front of the most powerful man in the company. "And here," Ashley said, pointing to a complex graph of projected revenue, "is where my personal strategy for the Thorn integration really pays off. It's a bold move, I know, but high risk brings high reward." Marcus Reed finally looked up. His eyes narrowed as he studied the screen. "That's a very specific algorithm, Ashley. It looks remarkably similar to the one used by the Mercer Group 3 years ago. How did you come across it?" Ashley faltered for a heartbeat, his confidence flickering like a dying bulb. I studied their models extensively. I adapted it for our needs." "Actually," Fay said, her voice cutting through the room like a piano wire. The silence that followed was absolute. Ashley turned to her, his face reddening with a mixture of shock and fury. Joanna's eyes went wide, her lips curling into a sneer. "Fay," Ashley hissed, "I don't remember asking for a data point." "I just thought Marcus would like to know," Fay continued, her voice calm and devoid of the clueless tone they expected, "that the algorithm isn't an adaptation. It's a proprietary code. One that requires a specific encryption key to even view the source data." She met Marcus Reed's gaze. She didn't look at her husband. She didn't look at his mistress. She looked at the man who held their careers in his hands. "And is that key in this room?" Marcus asked, his interest piqued. "It is," Fay said, "on a server that requires a dual authorization audit. I've already requested one for the end of the week." Ashley's hand gripped the edge of the mahogany table so hard his knuckles turned white. "She's confused, Marcus. My wife sometimes gets ahead of herself with the technical jargon. Fay, why don't you go grab us some coffee? We have a lot to get through." "I'm fine right here," Fay said, clicking a button on her own keyboard. A new window appeared on the main screen, overlapping Ashley's presentation. It was a simple directory of files, all time-stamped months ago, all authored by her. Joanna stepped forward, her heels clicking sharply on the hardwood. "This is highly irregular. Felicity, close that window immediately. This is a private executive briefing." "I think I'd like to see where this goes," Marcus said, leaning back and crossing his arms. Fay felt the weight of the secret power she had held for years. They thought she was the help. They thought she was the background noise to their brilliance. They had no idea she had been documenting every stolen idea, every forged signature, and every late-night meeting for months. She caught sight of Ryan Halloway standing by the door, the IT specialist she had consulted earlier that morning. He gave her a subtle, barely perceptible nod. The audit wasn't just coming, it was already live. Ashley's breathing was shallow now. He looked at the screen, then at Joanna, then back at Fay. The arrogance was being replaced by a creeping, cold realization. He tried to laugh it off, but the sound was brittle. "Fay, honey, we can talk about your contributions at dinner," Ashley said, his voice trembling with a forced sweetness that made the room feel oily. "There's no need to bore Marcus with the administrative details." "Oh, I'm not bored, Ashley," Marcus said, his eyes fixed on the screen where a file titled *Thorn Offshore Discrepancies* was highlighted in red. "In fact, I haven't been this interested in a presentation in years." Fay stood up, closing her laptop with a soft, final click. She looked at Ashley, seeing the man who had mocked her clothes, her family, and her intellect. She saw the man who had stood on her shoulders to reach a height he didn't deserve. "I'll leave you to the rest of the briefing," Fay said, her voice echoing in the stunned silence. "I have a few more files to organize for the audit. I'm sure you and Joanna have plenty to discuss with Marcus." She walked toward the door, her heels steady. She didn't look back to see the color draining from Ashley's face or the way Joanna Thorne suddenly moved 3 feet away from him. As she passed Ryan in the hall, she whispered, 6 days. 6 days, Ryan confirmed, his eyes glinting with the shared secret. Fay stepped into the elevator, the doors closing on the world she had built for a man who didn't deserve her. The countdown had begun. In 6 days, at the merger gala, the message on the nightstand wouldn't be the only thing that was revealed. By the time she reached the lobby, the sleeping lion was fully awake, and she was just getting started. The rain drummed a relentless, rhythmic beat against the floor-to-ceiling windows of the apartment, a sound that usually brought Felicity Fay Mercer a sense of peace. Tonight, it felt like a countdown. She sat in the dim light of her living room, the glow from her laptop casting sharp, angular shadows across her face. On the screen, a series of encrypted folders sat waiting, labeled simply as Project Italia. The silence was broken by the sharp, intrusive chime of the doorbell. Fay didn't move at first. She knew the cadence of that ring. It was heavy-handed and persistent, the sound of someone who believed their presence was a gift that shouldn't be kept waiting. She opened the door to find Alina Brown standing there, clutching a designer handbag to her chest like a shield. The older woman didn't wait for an invitation. She brushed past Fay, bringing with her the cloying, suffocating scent of expensive lilies and peppermint tea. "You aren't answering your phone, Fay," Alina said, her voice carrying that practiced, melodic lilt that usually preceded a manipulation. She began shedding her damp trench coat, handing it to Fay as if she were a coat-check girl. "Ashley is worried sick. He said you walked out of the briefing today. He's under so much pressure with this merger, and the last thing he needs is his partner acting temperamental." Fay hung the coat in the closet, her movements slow and deliberate. "I wasn't being temperamental, Alina. I was finished with my portion of the work." Alina turned, her eyes narrowing as she took in Fay's simple leggings and oversized sweater. She sighed, a sound of theatrical disappointment. "This is exactly what I mean. You've always been the invisible girl, Fay, the one who stays in the background and keeps the gears turning. It's a noble role, really. But Ashley is the face of this operation. He needs you to be his support, not his critic. He mentioned something about an audit. Surely you can just smooth that over for him." He's so stressed he could barely finish his steak at dinner. The rage spiked in Fay's chest, a hot, sharp needle. Ashley was out eating steak while she was supposed to be smoothing over the fact that he had no idea how the Italy Fund actually functioned. "He's at dinner?" Fay asked, her voice deceptively thin. "With Joanna Thorne," Alina added casually, inspecting a porcelain vase on the mantel. "Business, of course. Joanna has the ear of the board. Ashley has to maintain those relationships if he's going to be named senior VP after the merger. He needs you to be chill about this, Fay. Don't be one of those women who makes a scene over a few late nights." Fay felt the familiar weight of the gaslighting, the way Alina and her son had spent years convincing her that her own eyes were lying to her. Be chill. Stay invisible. Let him take the credit so the family succeeds. "I'll be very chill, Alina," Fay said, a small, cold smile touching her lips. "In fact, I've never been calmer." As soon as Alina left, after a 20-minute lecture on the importance of discretion and family legacy, Fay's phone vibrated on the coffee table. It was a FaceTime call from Ashley Brown. She answered. The background was blurred, but the ambient noise was unmistakable. The clinking of crystal and the low, jazz-heavy hum of Asterisk, the Gilded Lily Asterisk, the city's most exclusive rooftop bar. Ashley's face filled the screen, his skin flushed with expensive bourbon, his silk tie loosened just enough to look power casual. "Fay, babe," he snapped, his voice tight with an irritation he didn't bother to hide. "I'm looking at the preliminary audit bridge for the Italy Fund. Why the hell is the Mercer protocol listed as a third-party license? I told Marcus Reed that was proprietary tech I developed in-house." Fay leaned back against the sofa, the laptop screen reflected in her pupils. Because it is a third-party license, Ashley. You know that. I've told you every quarter for 2 years. Fix it, he hissed, leaning closer to the camera. Fay could see a flash of red silk in the corner of the frame, Joanna's dress. I don't care what you have to do. Log into the VPN, override the metadata, and move that IP under my name. Marcus is asking questions, and I can't have him thinking I'm outsourcing the core logic of the merger. You're the project coordinator. Coordinate it. The metadata is time-stamped, Ashley, she said calmly. If I change it now, the audit trail will show the edit. It'll look like fraud. It's only fraud if you get caught, and you're too smart to get caught, he sneered, his arrogance dripping through the speaker. Just do your job for once and stop being a martyr. I'm the one out here doing the heavy lifting, securing our future. You're just sitting in an apartment I pay for, playing with spreadsheets. I'll be home late. Don't wait up. The call cut to black. Fay stared at the phone for a long moment. He didn't pay for this apartment. The lease was in her name, paid for by a trust he didn't even know existed. He didn't develop the Mercer protocol. She had written every line of code during the nights he was networking at bars. He called her the invisible girl because he had spent years trying to erase her, never realizing that being invisible meant she saw everything he missed. She turned back to her laptop. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, but she wasn't opening the VPN to fix Ashley's mistake. Instead, she opened a secure chat window. Fay, are you in? Ryan, always. I've tracked the transfers. Joanna Thorne has been routing the consulting fees from the Italy fund into an offshore account in the Caymans. It's sloppy, Fay. They really thought no one would look at the back-end logs. Fay, they didn't think I existed. To them, the software is just a magic box that spits out money. Ryan, well, the magic box is about to break. I've secured the original patent filings for the Mercer protocol. Your name is the only one on the documents, Felicity. When Marcus Reed sees the audit results at the gala, Ashley isn't just going to look like a liar. He's going to look like a thief. Fay reached into her desk drawer and pulled out a heavy, cream-colored envelope. It was the invitation to the merger gala, 5 days away. She ran her thumb over the embossed gold lettering. Ashley thought he was the star of the show. He thought the gala was his coronation. She opened a folder on her desktop containing a video file. It was a recording from the office security cameras, one she had retrieved with Ryan's help. It showed Ashley and Joanna in the darkened boardroom 2 weeks ago, laughing as they moved files from Fay's secure drive to Ashley's personal cloud. You're sure she won't notice? Joanna had asked in the video, her hand resting on Ashley's shoulder. Fay, Ashley had laughed, a sound of pure, condescending dismissal. She's a mouse. She lives for the thank you I give her once a month. She'll do the work, I'll take the check, and she'll be happy just to be invited to the party. Fay closed the video. The sound of his laughter seemed to linger in the room, oily and thick. She looked at the countdown timer she had set on her secondary monitor. 5 days, 14 hours, 22 minutes. She picked up her phone and dialed a number she had memorized weeks ago. This is Felicity Mercer, she said when the call connected. Her voice was no longer thin. It was the sound of a blade being unsheathed. I'd like to schedule a private meeting with Marcus Reed. Tell him it's regarding the Italy fund discrepancies, and tell him I have the original keys to the Mercer protocol. She hung up and walked to the window. The rain was stopping, the clouds breaking to reveal a cold, uncaring moon. Ashley Brown had spent years standing on her shoulders, telling the world he was a giant. He had no idea that she was about to step away, and when she did, his fall wouldn't just be long. It would be absolute. Fay took a slow sip of her now-cold tea, the bitterness grounding her. The invisible girl was gone. In 5 days, they would all finally see her. And by then, it would be far too late to run. The executive floor of the Mercer Thorne building smelled of expensive ozone and the kind of floor wax that cost more than a month of Felicity Fay Mercer's rent. She stepped out of the elevator, her sensible heels silent on the plush charcoal carpeting. In her hand, she clutched a leather portfolio, not the cheap plastic one she used for daily meetings, but a vintage piece of Italian craftsmanship she had inherited from her father. It was a small, silent signal of the person she was becoming again. Marcus Reed was waiting behind a desk carved from a single slab of obsidian. He didn't look up immediately, his silver-rimmed glasses catching the light as he reviewed a series of digital charts. The room was deathly quiet, save for the low hum of a high-end air purification system. "You mentioned the Italy Fund, Felicity," Marcus said, his voice a deep baritone that commanded the air. He finally looked up, his eyes sharp and analytical. "That's a bold claim to make to the COO, especially considering Ashley Brown has been credited with its record-breaking performance this quarter." Fay didn't flinch. She sat in the guest chair, her posture perfect. "Ashley didn't build the Italy Fund, Marcus. He rebranded it. He took the Mercer protocol, a system my father designed and I perfected, and stripped away the risk mitigation layers to inflate the short-term returns. He's not generating profit, he's cannibalizing the principal." She opened the portfolio and slid a single, encrypted flash drive across the obsidian surface. The cold metal clicked against the stone. "Everything is there. The original algorithms, the modified logs, and the offshore accounts where the discrepancy fees are being funneled. Joanna Thorne authorized the bypasses. She's been signing off on his brilliance because she's getting 20% of the skim." Marcus reached for the drive, his fingers hovering over it. "If this is true, it's not just corporate fraud. It's a decapitation of the firm's reputation." "It's true," she said, her voice steady as a surgeon's hand. "And in 4 days at the annual shareholders' gala, Ashley plans to announce a secondary expansion of the fund. If he does, the exposure will be irreversible. You have the keys to the protocol on that drive. You can see the truth, or you can let him walk onto that stage and sink this company." Marcus looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time in 3 years. He saw past the clueless project coordinator who organized the office birthday parties and made sure the coffee pods were stocked. He saw the Mercer blood. "Why come to me now?" "Because," Fay replied, rising from her seat, "I want to see the look on his face when he realizes the invisible girl was the one holding the leash the entire time." She left the office without waiting for a reply, the scent of Marcus's expensive mahogany-scented cologne trailing behind her. The first seed was planted. When she returned to the main floor, the atmosphere was a jarring contrast. The bullpen was a cacophony of ringing phones and frantic typing, but the center of the storm was Ashley. He was leaning against Fay's desk, his hip bumping her organized stacks of files, laughing loudly as he showed a video on his phone to a group of junior analysts. He was wearing a new, tailored navy suit and a watch that glittered with the vulgarity of unearned wealth. "There she is," Ashley barked, his voice dripping with that familiar, patronizing warmth that set Fay's teeth on edge. "Our star coordinator. Fay, babe, I need you to run down to the basement archives. I'm missing the 2019 legacy data for the Italy project. I told Joanna I'd have the final projections on her desk by 5. "I'm a little busy with the quarterly audit reports, Ashley," she said, moving to her chair. Ashley's smile didn't falter, but his eyes turned as hard as marbles. He leaned in closer, his expensive, citrusy aftershave clashing with the smell of her cold tea. "Did I sound like I was asking? The audit reports are busy work. This is the Italy Fund. This is what keeps the lights on while you play with your spreadsheets. Just go get the boxes, okay? And maybe grab me a double espresso on your way back. You know how I like it." One of the junior analysts, a girl named Sarah who Fay had mentored for months, looked down at her shoes, clearly embarrassed by the display of blatant disrespect. The others just chuckled, following Ashley's lead. "Of course," Fay said, her voice dropping into the soft, compliant tone she had used as a shield for years. "I'll see what I can find in the archives." "Good girl," Ashley said, patting her shoulder with a heavy, possessive hand before turning back to his audience. "As I was saying, the secret to the Italy gains isn't math. It's instinct. You either have it or you're relegated to the basement." Fay walked toward the elevators, her heart hammering a steady, vengeful rhythm against her ribs. She didn't go to the archives. She went to the break room where she found Ryan Halloway staring intensely at a laptop screen. Ryan didn't look up, but his fingers danced across the keys. The back door into the Thorn Brown private server is wide open, Fay. They didn't even change the encryption keys after the last update. Arrogance is a hell of a security flaw. Did you find the emails? She asked, standing so she blocked the view of the security camera in the corner. Better, Ryan whispered, a small, jagged smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. I found the voice memos. Ashley likes to record his visionary thoughts on his phone. There's a 15-minute recording of him and Joanna discussing how to frame you if the SEC ever comes sniffing around the Italy fund. They've been planting a paper trail that points directly to your login credentials for the last 6 months. Fay felt a cold shiver of rage wash over her, followed by a searing clarity. They weren't just stealing her work, they were preparing her as a sacrificial lamb. Keep it safe, Ryan. Put it on the cloud backup we discussed. I want that recording ready to play the second I give the signal at the gala. You got it, but Fay, be careful. Ashley's looking for a reason to cut you loose before the weekend. He's feeling untouchable. Let him, she said. The higher he climbs, the more bones he'll break when he hits the ground. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. It was a text from Alina Brown. Fay, honey, Ashley mentioned you were being a bit difficult at the office today. Remember what we talked about. He's under so much pressure with this big gala coming up. Be a sweetheart and just support him. His success is your success, dear. Don't be greedy. Fay stared at the screen until the light dimmed. The betrayal of a mother who chose the golden sun's lies over the daughter's truth was a familiar ache, but today it didn't hurt. It only sharpened her resolve. She deleted the message without replying. She spent the next 3 hours in the quiet, dusty silence of the archives, not looking for Ashley's data, but finalizing her own. She pulled the original Mercer protocol ledgers, the physical ones her father had kept in his own handwriting. They were the ultimate proof of ownership, a legacy that Ashley had tried to erase. As the sun began to set, casting long, bloody shadows across the office floor, Fay emerged from the basement. She found Ashley and Joanna Thorne standing by the large floor-to-ceiling windows in the executive suite, clinking glasses of amber liquid. To the future, Joanna said, her voice like silk over gravel. She was a striking woman, all sharp angles and expensive jewelry, the kind of person who viewed people as assets or liabilities. Ashley laughed, the sound echoing in the nearly empty office. To the future, and to the people who make it possible for us to enjoy it. He caught sight of Fay standing by the door and raised his glass in a mock salute. Find those boxes, Fay. The archives were very illuminating, Ashley, she said, her voice calm, almost pleasant. I found exactly what I was looking for. Joanna narrowed her eyes, her predatory instinct flickering for a second. Is there a problem, Felicity? No problem at all, Joanna. I was just thinking about the gala. It's going to be a night to remember. It certainly is, Ashley bragged, stepping forward to loom over her. He reached out and flicked a speck of dust off Fay's shoulder, a gesture of supreme condescension. Make sure your little dress is pressed, Fay. I might even let you stand on the stage for the group photo. It'll be the highlight of your career. Fay smiled, a real, genuine smile that didn't reach her eyes. I wouldn't miss it for the world, Ashley. I've been practicing my speech. Ashley snorted, turning back to Joanna. She's lost it. Too much time in the basement. Fay turned and walked away, her footsteps echoing in the quiet hall. She reached the elevator and pressed the button for the lobby. As the doors began to slide shut, she caught her reflection in the polished brass. She didn't see the invisible girl anymore. She saw a predator waiting for the tall grass to part. She pulled her phone from her pocket and looked at the countdown timer she had set. 4 days, 2 hours, 11 minutes. The Italy fund was a ticking time bomb, and Ashley Brown was currently sitting on the detonator, convinced it was a throne. Fay stepped out into the cool night air, the city lights blurring into a sea of possibilities. She had the evidence. She had the ally. And in 4 days, she would have the justice she had waited 5 years to claim. She hailed a taxi, the cold weight of the flash drive in her purse a comforting reminder of the storm to come. As the car pulled away from the curb, she looked back at the Mercer Thorne building one last time. It was a beautiful structure, all glass and light, but it was built on a foundation of sand, and Fay was the tide. The smell of burnt espresso and expensive, cloying lily perfume hung heavy in the break room as Felicity Fay Mercer reached for a paper towel. She didn't look up when the sharp, rhythmic staccato of 4-inch heels announced the arrival of the woman who had spent the last 5 years making her life a living hell. Ashley Brown didn't just walk into a room, she colonized it. She tossed a crumpled, grease-stained pastry bag onto the clean counter Fay had just wiped down. The bag leaked a dark spot of butter onto the white laminate, a small, deliberate act of territorial marking. "Fay, you're still wearing that hideous polyester scarf?" Ashley asked, her voice vibrating with a fake, sugary concern that didn't reach her eyes. She reached out, 2 fingers pinching the fabric of the scarf around Fay's neck as if she were handling a biohazard. "It's so brave of you to just not care about how you present yourself to the world. It's almost inspiring in a tragic sort of way." Fay gently detached the woman's fingers from her neck. She kept her expression carefully neutral, the mask of the Clueless project coordinator firmly in place. "It was a gift from my grandmother, Ashley." "Clearly," she snorted, turning to the mirror to check her lipstick. "Anyway, move your thrift store lunch. I need the space for the catering spread. Joanna and I are celebrating the finalization of the Italy project. Not that you'd understand the complexities of a multi-million-dollar international fund, but try not to get your crumbs near the champagne flutes." Fay moved her modest glass container of pasta salad. As she did, she caught a glimpse of Ashley's phone screen on the counter. A notification from a luxury travel agency flashed. First-class suite confirmed. Rome to Amalfi. "The Italy project," Fay said softly, her voice trailing off as if she were lost in thought. She looked directly at her manager. "You've been working so hard on those ledgers, Ashley. You must be exhausted. Are you absolutely certain all the accounts are balanced? I'd hate for a small oversight to ruin your celebration." Ashley paused, her hand frozen midair as she adjusted a diamond-encrusted earring. She let out a sharp, jagged laugh that grated like sandpaper. "An oversight from me." "Fay, honey, I've been running circles around this department while you were still trying to figure out how the copier works. I don't make mistakes. I make money. Something you'll never have to worry about on your pathetic salary." She leaned in closer, the scent of her perfume becoming suffocating. "Do you know what the difference between us is? I know how to take what I want. You just wait for permission to exist. Now be a good little girl and go finish those filing reports. The adults have actual work to do." Fay watched her swagger out of the room. She waited until the sound of those heels faded before reaching into her pocket. She felt the cold, hard edges of the encrypted drive. She didn't feel insulted. She felt a cold, clinical sense of timing. 10 minutes later, Fay was in the narrow, windowless hallway leading to the server room. The air here was cooler, humming with the low-frequency vibration of thousands of spinning discs. Ryan Halloway was waiting by the door, his eyes darting toward the security camera at the end of the hall. "The bridge is built," Ryan whispered, his voice barely audible over the hum of the cooling fans. He handed her a small, translucent keycard. "I've mapped the Italy fund back to the shell accounts Joanna Thorne set up. The money didn't just move, it screamed. But Fay, if we do this, there's no going back. Marcus Reed is arriving for the quarterly audit in 72 hours. Once I upload the final decryption key, the system will flag every single unauthorized transfer the second he logs in." Fay took the card. The plastic felt warm from his hand. "I'm not looking to go back, Ryan. I've spent 5 years in the dark. I'm quite ready for the lights to come on." "She thinks she's untouchable," Ryan said, shaking his head. "I heard her on the phone with a leaner Brown earlier. She was bragging about the villa she's looking at. She actually told her mother that you were too stupid to notice the missing decimal points." A small, sharp smile tugged at the corner of Fay's mouth. "Arrogance is a terminal condition, Ryan. She's so busy looking down at me that she hasn't realized the ground has already shifted." She left the IT wing and headed toward the executive suite. She had one more delivery to make. As she approached Joanna Thorne's office, the door swung open. The two women, the boss and the bully, were huddled over a tablet, their faces illuminated by the glow of the screen. They looked like conspirators, their laughter muffled by the heavy mahogany door. "Oh, Fay," Joanna said, her voice dripping with the practiced condescension of the corporate elite. "Just the person I wanted to see. I need you to run these personal expense reports for Ashley. She's been so focused on the Italy project that she hasn't had time for the paperwork." Joanna shoved a thick folder into Fay's arms. The top receipt was for a $4,000 handbag, listed under office supplies. "Of course, Joanna," Fay said, her voice steady. She looked at Ashley, who was smirking, her arms crossed over her designer blazer. "I'll make sure these are processed immediately. It's important to have a complete paper trail, isn't it? For the audit." Ashley rolled her eyes, a gesture of pure, unadulterated entitlement. "God, you're such a drone. Audit, audit, audit. It's a routine check, Fay. Marcus Reed is a friend of the family. He's coming for a glass of scotch and a handshake, not to play detective. Now run along. My dry cleaning needs to be picked up by 5, and since you're already doing menial so well today, I figured I'd save myself the trip." 3 days, Fay said, almost to herself. "What was that?" Ashley snapped. "The dry cleaning," Fay lied easily, her eyes reflecting the overhead fluorescent lights. "I'll make sure it's ready in 3 days. Everything will be ready in 3 days." Ashley waved her off with a flick of her wrist, already turning back to Joanna to discuss the vintage of the wine they would serve at the celebration. Fay walked back to her cubicle. She sat down and opened the folder. She didn't look at the receipts. Instead, she pulled her phone from her pocket and tapped the screen. The countdown timer was a relentless, glowing heartbeat in the dim light of her workspace. 3 days, 1 hour, 44 minutes. She reached into her desk drawer and pulled out a small, framed photo of her father, the man whose reputation Joanna and Ashley had shredded to cover their first set of tracks 5 years ago. She placed the photo face down. She didn't need to see his face to remember why she was here. Across the office, she could hear Ashley's loud, boastful voice. She was telling a junior associate that the secret to success was knowing which rules were meant to be broken. Fay opened a blank spreadsheet. Her fingers flew across the keys, not completing the fake expense reports, but finalizing the sequence that would link the handbag, the villa, and the Amalfi flights to the exact moment the company's pension fund had dipped. She felt a strange, vibrating calm. The warning had been given. The bait had been taken. The arrogance of the predator had become the trap of the prey. As the office began to empty for the evening, Fay stayed behind. She watched the sun dip below the skyline, casting long, jagged shadows across the carpet. She picked up her bag, the weight of the evidence a comforting presence against her side. She walked past Ashley's desk. A single, expensive silk scarf lay forgotten on the chair, a vibrant splash of color against the gray fabric. Fay didn't touch it. She didn't need to. In 72 hours, Ashley Brown wouldn't have a chair to sit in, let alone a scarf to wear. Fay stepped into the elevator. As the doors closed, she saw her reflection again. The invisible girl was gone. The storm was no longer coming. It was already inside the building, waiting for the clock to strike 0. She pressed the button for the lobby, her heart beating with the slow, steady rhythm of a predator who knew exactly when the tall grass would finally part. The humidity of the city night clung to the glass walls of the grand atrium, but inside, the air was filtered, chilled, and smelled faintly of expensive lilies and desperation. Felicity Fay Mercer stood in the shadows of the mezzanine, her fingers tracing the smooth, cold edge of the tablet hidden in her evening clutch. It was a small weight, but it felt heavier than a lead bar. On that screen, a single green progress bar pulsed with a soft, rhythmic light. 100%. The data was synchronized. The ghost was in the machine. Below, the gala was a sea of black ties and shimmering silk. This was the annual Founders Circle event, the pinnacle of the corporate social calendar, and the exact stage Ashley Brown had spent months preparing to conquer. Fay watched the figures moving through the light, their laughter echoing up to the rafters like the chattering of colorful birds. They had no idea that the floor beneath their polished shoes was already beginning to crack. A vibration hummed against her palm. She pulled out her phone, shielding the screen. A message from Ryan Halloway flickered into view. Backdoor is wide open. The server is primed. Just give the word and the presentation file swaps. You ready? Fay didn't type a reply. She simply tapped a thumbs-up icon and tucked the phone away. She took a slow, steady breath, feeling the cool air fill her lungs. For years, she had been the girl who stayed late to fix the spreadsheets Ashley broke. She was the one who ordered the catering Ashley took credit for. Tonight, she was something else entirely. She was the architect of a collapse. She descended the marble staircase, her movements fluid and unhurried. She had chosen a dress of deep, midnight navy, elegant enough to belong, but dark enough to vanish into the periphery. As she reached the main floor, the sensory assault of the gala hit her. The sharp, citrusy sting of expensive gin, the rhythmic asterisk clack 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 asterisk of designer heels on stone, and the oppressive heat of too many bodies in one space. She spotted her target near the champagne fountain. Ashley stood at the center of a tight circle, her laughter ringing out like a sharp bell. She was wearing a gown of aggressive, metallic gold that caught every ray of the spotlights, making her look like a gilded statue. Next to her, Joanna Thorne leaned in, whispering something that made Ashley throw her head back in a performative display of joy. They looked like the undisputed queens of the hive. Fay moved closer, drifting through the crowd like a shadow. She stopped near a pillar just as a young server, a girl who couldn't have been older than 20, approached Ashley's group with a tray of crystal flutes. The girl was trembling slightly, her eyes wide with the pressure of the evening. "Excuse me, Miss Brown," the server whispered, offering the tray. Ashley didn't even turn her head. She reached back blindly, her fingers fumbling for a glass. As she pulled it away, a single drop of champagne splashed onto the golden fabric of her sleeve. The laughter stopped instantly. The air around the group seemed to drop 10 degrees. Ashley turned, her face contorting into a mask of pure, cold vitriol. "Are you blind?" Ashley's voice wasn't loud, but it had the cutting edge of a razor. "Do you have any idea what this dress costs? It's a custom piece." "It's worth more than your entire education, you clumsy little idiot." The server blanched, her hands shaking so violently the remaining glasses began to chime against each other. I'm so sorry, ma'am. It was an accident, An accident is dropping a pen," Joanna Thorne interjected, her eyes narrowing as she stepped forward to support her protégé. "This is incompetence. Give me your name. I want you off this floor in 5 minutes." "Please," the girl stammered, tears welling in her eyes. "I need this job." Ashley leaned in, her perfume, a cloying, heavy gardenia, wafting toward Fay even from several feet away. "Then you should have thought about that before you ruined my night. Get out of my sight before I have security throw you into the street." Fay watched the girl scurry away, her head bowed in shame. The witnesses in the circle didn't speak. They simply adjusted their ties or sipped their drinks, eyes averted. In this world, cruelty was just another form of currency. Ashley turned back to Joanna, her expression shifting back to a smug pout. "Ugh, the help they hire these days. It's like they find them in the gutter." "Don't let it ruin your moment, darling," Joanna said, patting her arm. "In 20 minutes, Marcus Reed is going to announce the new Senior Director of Operations. We both know whose name is on that envelope." Fay felt a surge of cold fire in her chest. She stepped out from behind the pillar, her face a mask of practiced neutrality. "Good evening, Ashley. Joanna." Ashley's eyes flicked toward her, dripping with immediate disdain. She looked Fay up and down, her lip curling. "Oh, look. The office furniture decided to dress up. Who let you in, Fay? I thought I told you to stay back and monitor the remote login for the presentation." "The login is stable," Fay said, her voice level. "I thought I should be here to see the results of all our hard work." Ashley let out a sharp, mocking puff of air. "Our work, that's cute. You've been a very helpful little assistant, Fay, I'll give you that. But don't confuse data entry with leadership. You're here to make sure the slides transition correctly. If you want to be useful, go find that clumsy girl and tell her where to find the club soda. My sleeve is still damp." Joanna chuckled, a dry, rattling sound. Now, Ashley, Let the girl have her one night of glamour. She probably spent 3 months' salary on that dress. It's almost a shame it'll be back in the thrift store bin tomorrow. Fay didn't flinch. She didn't argue. She simply looked at the gold watch on Ashley's wrist, a heavy, ostentatious piece of jewelry that Ashley had bragged about buying with her performance bonus. 15 minutes until the keynote, Fay said softly. Are you ready for your big reveal? Ashley straightened her shoulders, her ego visibly inflating. I've been ready my whole life. Marcus is already in the VIP lounge. He told me he was immensely impressed with the quarterly growth figures I submitted. He said he'd never seen a turnaround that fast. He hasn't, Fay agreed, a small, sharp smile tugging at the corner of her mouth. It's truly one for the history books. Ashley dismissed her with a wave of her hand, turning back to a group of investors who had just drifted over. Fay walked away, her heart beating with a slow, steady rhythm. She moved toward the back of the atrium, where the technical booth was nestled behind a velvet curtain. She found Ryan Holloway sitting behind a bank of monitors, his face illuminated by the blue glow of a dozen spreadsheets. He looked up as she entered, a nervous grin playing on his lips. The COO just arrived, Ryan whispered. Marcus Reed is at the head table. He's got the promotion envelope in his pocket. Ashley's presentation is loaded into the queue. It's the fraudulent one, the one with the adjusted margins and the ghost accounts. Fay looked at the screen. And the swap. Ryan pointed to a secondary file hidden in a deep directory. It was titled Asterisk Recovery Backup Final Asterisk. I've mapped it to the master override. The second she hits the clicker for the third slide, the one where she claims credit for the regional expansion, this file takes over. It'll play the real numbers, the theft logs, the internal memos between her and Joanna. And the best part, Fay leaned in. What? I've hard-coded the exit. Once it starts, the console locks. Nobody can turn it off, not even the house tech. Fay reached out and touched the screen, the warmth of the monitor tingling against her fingertips. She thought about the server Ashley had just humiliated. She thought about the years of being talked over, stepped on, and erased. She thought about Alina Brown telling her to be chill while her husband's family tore her life apart. Do it, Fay said. 10 minutes out, Ryan cautioned. Once I prime this, there's no going back. If we do this, Ashley doesn't just lose the promotion. She loses everything. Criminal charges, Fay. Fraud is a felony. Fay looked out through the gap in the velvet curtains. She saw Ashley laughing, holding a fresh glass of champagne, basking in the light of a world she had built on a foundation of lies. She saw Marcus Reed taking his seat at the center of the room, the embodiment of the authority Ashley so desperately craved. She chose the game, Fay said, her voice dropping to a cold, crystalline whisper. I'm just finishing it. She left the booth and made her way back to the floor. The lights in the atrium began to dim, a signal that the formal program was beginning. The chatter of the crowd died down to a low hum of anticipation. Fay found a spot near the back, leaning against a cold stone pillar. She watched as Marcus Reed walked up to the podium. He was a man of iron-gray hair and an even firmer reputation for integrity. He adjusted the microphone, the sound echoing through the vast space. Ladies and gentlemen, Marcus began, his voice commanding the room. Tonight, we celebrate not just our success, but the people who make it possible. Innovation requires many things, but above all, it requires honesty and vision. Fay saw Ashley move toward the side of the stage, smoothing her gold dress, her face glowing with the absolute certainty of her impending triumph. She looked like a predator who believed the entire forest was her territory. Fay reached into her clutch and gripped the tablet. She felt the vibration of a final countdown. 5 minutes. She looked at Ashley one last time. The gold dress, the stolen jewelry, the arrogant tilt of her head. It was all so bright, so loud, so temporary. The lights went completely black, save for the massive projector screen behind the podium. To show you exactly how we achieved these record-breaking numbers, Marcus continued, I'd like to invite our project manager, Ashley Brown, to the stage. The room erupted in applause. Ashley stepped into the spotlight, her smile radiant, her eyes fixed on the prize she thought was already hers. She took the remote clicker from Marcus's hand with a graceful nod. Fay stood perfectly still in the darkness. The giddy ghost had stopped wandering. It was time for the haunting to begin. The ballroom was a cavern of expectant silence, smelling of expensive lilies and the faint, ozone scent of the high-end projectors humming in the rafters. Ashley Brown stood at the center of the stage, bathed in a golden spotlight that made her sequined dress shimmer like dragon scales. She held the remote clicker with the casual arrogance of a queen holding a scepter, her chin tilted at that precise, practiced angle she used when she wanted to remind everyone in the room that she was the architect of their success. Felicity Fay Mercer stood in the deep shadows near the back exit, her fingers resting lightly on the cold glass of the tablet Ryan Holloway had synced to the house system. She could feel the vibration of the room, the collective bated breath of 300 stakeholders, the predatory stillness of Joanna Thorne in the front row, and the heavy, judicial presence of Marcus Reed at the head table. Ashley didn't even look at the screen behind her as she pressed the button for the first slide. "Our growth this quarter wasn't just a matter of luck," she began, her voice projected with a melodic, manufactured confidence. "It was the result of a vision I implemented from day one. If you look at the primary acquisition data," she clicked. The screen didn't show the polished bar graphs Ashley had spent weeks faking. Instead, a grainy, high-definition scan of a handwritten ledger filled the 20-foot display. It was the shadow book, the real numbers Fay had painstakingly recovered from the deleted cache of the department's server. At the bottom of the page, highlighted in a piercing, digital red, was the original project timestamp. It predated Ashley's arrival at the company by 6 months. The silence that followed was visceral. It wasn't just a lack of noise. It was a physical weight that seemed to suck the oxygen out of the ballroom. Ashley continued for 3 more words, which clearly demonstrates, before the stillness finally registered. She frowned, her gaze lingering on Marcus Reed, whose face had transformed into a mask of cold, hard granite. Slowly, almost as if she were moving through water, she turned her head to look at the screen behind her. Fay watched from the darkness. This was the moment the predator realized the forest was no longer hers. Ashley's face didn't just pale. It seemed to physically dissolve under the harsh glare of the stage lights. The radiant, practiced smile she had worn moments ago curdled into a grotesque mask of disbelief. Her jaw didn't just drop. It hung slack, her lower lip trembling with a rhythmic, uncontrolled twitch that made her look suddenly frail. The carefully applied rose-colored blush on her cheeks now stood out like bruises against skin that had turned the sickly, translucent gray of wet parchment. Her eyes, once wide with manufactured triumph, darted frantically toward the wings, the pupils blown wide with a primal, cornered animal terror. She looked less like a corporate rising star and more like a ghost caught in the act of dying. There must be a technical glitch," Ashley stammered, her voice cracking, the melody gone. She clicked the remote again, her thumb white-knuckled against the plastic. The screen flickered. A new image appeared. It was an email thread dated 3 weeks prior between Ashley and Joanna Thorne. The subject line read, "Finalizing the Mercer erasure." The text was clear, bright, and undeniable. "Make sure Felicity's name is stripped from the final filing," Joanna had written. "We can't have the board thinking a coordinator did the heavy lifting. I'll handle Marcus." A collective gasp rippled through the room, followed by the frantic, rhythmic clicking of 100 camera phones. The social currency of the room had shifted in a heartbeat. Joanna Thorne didn't move, but the wine glass in her hand began to shake so violently that the crimson liquid sloshed over the rim, staining her white silk gloves like fresh blood. She looked toward the exit, her eyes searching for a way out, but the crowd had pressed inward, a wall of witnesses who were now seeing the corruption she had spent a career hiding. Marcus Reed stood up. He didn't use a microphone, yet his voice cut through the rising murmurs like a blade. "Ashley, stay exactly where you are." He turned his gaze toward the back of the room, toward the shadows where Fay stood. He didn't see her yet, but he knew she was there. The IT specialist, Ryan, had done his job well. The backdoor access was absolute. Ashley tried to speak, her hands fluttering at her throat, clawing at the stolen necklace that suddenly looked like a noose. "Marcus, I can explain. This is a fabrication. Felicity, she's unstable. She's trying to—" "The data is verified, Ashley," Marcus interrupted, his voice dropping to a terrifyingly calm register. "The server logs show these files were uploaded from your terminal using your encrypted key, but the metadata proves they were stolen from the Mercer archives." He looked at Joanna, who was now standing, her face a ghostly white. "And Joanna, we'll be discussing your handling of me in a much more private setting, with the legal team." Fay stepped out of the shadows. She walked slowly down the center aisle, the sound of her modest heels on the marble floor echoing in the silence. She didn't look at the board members or the shocked investors. Her eyes were fixed on the woman on the stage. As she reached the front, Fay stopped. She looked up at Ashley, who was now physically shrinking, her shoulders hunched as if trying to disappear into the sequins of her dress. The smell of Ashley's cloying, expensive perfume, lily of the valley, felt suffocatingly thick in the air. "You told me once that I was just a ghost in this office, Ashley," Fay said, her voice quiet but carrying to every corner of the ballroom. "You said that people like me are meant to be the background noise for people like you." Ashley's breath was coming in short, ragged hitches. She looked down at Fay, her mouth opening and closing, but no sound came out. The arrogance that had defined her for years had been stripped away, leaving behind nothing but a hollow, terrified girl caught in a lie too big to survive. Fay reached into her clutch and pulled out a small, physical folder. She didn't throw it. She didn't shout. She simply placed it on the edge of the stage, right at Ashley's feet. "That's the original patent filing," Fay said. "The one with my signature, notarized a year before you even interviewed here. I own the intellectual property for the system you just tried to sell as your own." Fay turned to Marcus Reed. She gave him a short, professional nod, the nod of an equal, not an assistant. "The rest of the documentation is in your inbox, Marcus, along with the resignation of every member of my team who refused to work under this fraud." The room was a sea of shifting power. People who had laughed at Ashley's jokes 10 minutes ago were now physically leaning away from her, as if her failure were contagious. Eleanor Brown, Ashley's mother, was huddled in her seat, her face buried in her hands, the enabler finally forced to witness the wreckage of the monster she had encouraged. Fay didn't wait for a response. She didn't stay to watch the security guards, who were already moving toward the stage. She didn't stay to hear Joanna Thorne's frantic, whispered excuses to the COO. She turned her back on the spotlight, the stage, and the woman who had tried to bury her. As she walked toward the grand mahogany doors, she felt the weight of the last 3 years finally slide off her shoulders. The haunting was over. She reached the exit and paused, her hand on the heavy brass handle. She looked back one last time. Ashley was still standing in the light, but the screen behind her had changed again. It was now a simple, black-and-white image of the company's ethics policy, specifically the section on immediate termination for cause. Fay pushed the door open. The cool night air hit her face, smelling of rain and freedom. Behind her, she heard the first sounds of the real explosion, the shouting, the accusations, and the sound of a glass finally shattering on the marble floor. She walked down the steps toward the waiting car where Ryan was already parked, the engine idling. She didn't look back. There were still things to be done, people to hold accountable, and a new life to build from the ashes of the old one. But for tonight, the detonator had done its job. The rain had started to fall in earnest, a rhythmic drumming against the roof of the car that muffled the distant sirens echoing from the city center. Ryan kept his eyes on the road, his knuckles white against the steering wheel, but he didn't ask her if she was okay. He knew her well enough to know she was more than okay. She was focused. Felicity Fay Mercer sat in the passenger seat, the glow of her phone illuminating a face that was as still as a frozen lake. The adrenaline from the building was fading, replaced by a cold, crystalline clarity. Her phone vibrated. The name on the screen was Marcus Reed. She answered on the third vibration. She didn't say hello. She simply waited. "Fay!" The COO's voice was gravelly, strained by the weight of what he had just witnessed on the upper floors. "Where are you?" "I'm safe, Marcus. I assume the presentation didn't go as Joanna Thorne planned." There was a long pause, filled only with the crackle of a bad connection and the heavy breathing of a man whose company was currently imploding. "That's an understatement. The board is in an uproar. Joanna is trying to claim a system hack, but the documents that flashed on the screen, they had her digital signature on the authorization for the offshore transfers. And Ashley is hysterical. She's currently in the lobby, screaming at the security team to find you." Fay leaned her head back against the leather headrest, closing her eyes. The scent of Ryan's expensive sandalwood car freshener grounded her. "She thinks I have the physical files. She thinks if she can get to me, she can stop the bleeding." "Can you come back?" Marcus asked. It wasn't a command, it was a plea. "The police are on their way to take a statement regarding the fraud allegations. I need someone who actually knows where the bodies are buried." "I'm 5 minutes away," she said, her voice a calm contrast to the chaos she knew was waiting. "And Marcus, tell the IT department to stay away from the intercom override. I have one more thing to show everyone." She hung up and looked at Ryan. He didn't need to be told. He swung the car into a sharp U-turn, the tires hissing against the wet asphalt. When they pulled up to the glass-fronted headquarters, the scene was a tableau of corporate disaster. 2 police cruisers were already parked at the curb, their blue and red lights reflecting off the puddles. Fay stepped out of the car, the cool mist of the rain settling on her skin like a shroud. She didn't run. She walked with the deliberate, measured pace of someone who had already won the game and was simply arriving to collect the trophy. As she pushed through the heavy revolving doors, the sound hit her first. It was the sound of a legacy shattering. Ashley Brown was standing in the center of the marble lobby, her designer blazer discarded on a chair, her hair coming loose from its perfectly manicured bun. She was pointing a finger at a young security guard who looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. "I don't care about the protocol," Ashley shrieked, her voice echoing off the high ceilings. "She stole company property. Felicity Fay Mercer is a thief and a disgruntled low-level employee who is trying to sabotage this merger because she's too incompetent to keep up." Joanna Thorne stood a few feet away, her face a mask of calculated fury. She was on her phone, her voice low and sharp, likely talking to a lawyer, but her eyes were darting around the room, searching for an exit that didn't involve handcuffs. Fay stopped 10 feet away. She didn't say a word. She just stood there, her hands folded in front of her. The silence began at the edges of the room and rippled inward. One by one, the employees lingering in the lobby, the board members descending the stairs, and even the police officers paused to look at the woman who had walked into the eye of the storm without a single hair out of place. Ashley turned, her eyes wild. When she saw Fay, a look of pure, unadulterated venom crossed her face. You little bitch! Do you have any idea what you've done? You've ruined everything. Where are the drives? Give them to me right now, or I swear to God, I will make sure you never work in this town again." She lunged forward, but Marcus Reed stepped out from the elevator bank, his presence like a wall of iron. "That's enough, Ashley." "No, it's not enough." Ashley turned on him, her voice cracking. "She's the one who did this. She hacked the system. She's trying to frame me and Joanna because she's jealous. She's a nobody, a pathetic, chill little girl who was lucky I even gave her the time of day." Fay finally spoke. Her voice wasn't loud, but in the sudden quiet of the lobby, it carried to every corner. "I'm not the one who needs to explain myself, Ashley, and I think everyone should hear why." She reached into her pocket and pressed a single button on her phone. A burst of static erupted from the building's high-end intercom system. It was a sound that usually preceded a mundane announcement about a lost set of keys or a car with its lights on. But this time, it was different. A voice began to play. It was clear, crisp, and unmistakably Ashley's. "Honestly, Joanna, she's so stupid it's almost sad. I just tell her it's a special project, and she signs whatever I put in front of her. She actually thinks I'm her friend. If she only knew I've been siphoning her bonus pool into the offshore account for 18 months. She's the perfect scapegoat, clueless, quiet, and completely replaceable." The lobby went so silent that the only sound was the hum of the air conditioning. Ashley's face didn't just pale, it seemed to structurally fail. Her jaw went slack, her lower lip trembling as the color drained away, leaving her skin a sickly, mottled gray. Her eyes, once sharp with predatory intent, stretched wide until the whites showed all the way around the irises, darting frantically like a trapped animal looking for an exit that didn't exist. Her nostrils flared with every ragged, shallow breath, and a fine sheen of cold sweat broke out across her forehead, matting her expensive bangs. The arrogance that had been her armor for years simply evaporated, leaving behind a hollow, terrified mask of a woman who realized, too late, that the floor had vanished beneath her designer heels. The recording didn't stop. Now it was Joanna's voice, cold and clinical. Just make sure the paper trail leads back to her workstation. If the auditors ask, we say Fay was the one with the administrative overrides. Marcus trusts her, which makes her the perfect fall guy. Once the merger goes through, we'll fire her for performance issues and she'll be too broken to fight back. Joanna Thorne looked like she had been turned to stone. She didn't scream. She didn't move. She simply closed her eyes as the board members, men and women she had played golf with, shared expensive dinners with, and lied to for years, slowly backed away from her. The space around her grew, a physical manifestation of her sudden toxicity. Marcus Reed looked at the two women with a disgust so profound it was visceral. He turned to the police officers. I believe you have everything you need for the initial charges. The digital forensics team will have the full logs of the offshore transfers by morning. Ashley finally found her voice, but it was a pathetic, high-pitched whimper. Fay, Felicity, please, you don't understand. I was under so much pressure. Joanna made me do it. We can talk about this. I'll give the money back. I'll tell them it was all her. Joanna snapped her eyes open, glaring at Ashley with a loathing that promised a very long, very bitter legal battle between the two of them. Shut up, you idiot! Fay walked toward them, stopping just inches from Ashley. She could smell the expensive, cloying perfume Ashley wore, the scent of someone who tried too hard to belong. Up close, the manager looked small, diminished. You told me once that I didn't belong in a room like this, Fay said, her voice a cool, steady blade. You said I was lucky to be in your shadow. She leaned in closer, her voice dropping to a whisper that only Ashley could hear. The thing about shadows, Ashley, is that they only exist as long as someone else is holding the light, and I just turned yours off. Fay turned to Marcus. The rest of the files are on the secure server Ryan set up. You have my resignation, effective immediately. I think I've spent enough time in this building. Fay, wait, Marcus said, stepping forward. We need people like you. We can fix this. Your position, Joanna's position, it's open. Fay looked around the lobby. She saw the faces of the people she had worked with for years, the ones who had ignored her, the ones who had laughed at Ashley's jokes at her expense, and the ones who were now looking at her with a newfound, terrifying respect. No, thank you, Marcus, she said, a small, genuine smile touching her lips for the first time. I think I'm done being the perfect scapegoat. I'd rather see what happens when I'm the one in charge of my own light. She didn't wait for his response. She didn't look back at Ashley, who was currently being read her rights as she collapsed onto the marble floor in a heap of expensive silk and ruined ambition. She didn't look at Joanna, who was being led toward the door in silence. Fay walked out of the building. The rain had slowed to a drizzle, the air smelling of wet stone and the promise of a clean slate. Ryan was leaning against the car, the engine idling, a quiet sentinel in the night. She climbed into the passenger seat and shut the door, the click of the latch sounding like the final period at the end of a very long, very dark chapter. Where to? Ryan asked softly. Fay looked out at the city lights, the reflection of the neon signs dancing in the puddles. The weight that had been sitting on her chest for years was gone, replaced by a lightness that felt almost like flying. Away from here, she said. But first I need to make one more call. As they pulled away from the curb, Fay pulled out her phone and dialed a number she knew by heart. It rang twice before a woman's voice answered, sounding tired and annoyed. Fay, do you have any idea what time it is? I told you, if you're calling about that promotion again, you just need to be more chill and wait your turn. Ashley says. Eleanor, Fay interrupted, her voice cutting through her mother's enabler tone like a hot wire through wax. Turn on the news. Your daughter is about to be the lead story. She didn't wait for the scream. She ended the call and tossed the phone into the center console. She didn't need it anymore. The reckoning was over, the debt was paid in full, and for the first time in her life, Felicity Fay Mercer wasn't waiting for anyone's permission to exist. But as the car merged onto the highway, a single notification lit up the discarded phone. An encrypted message from an unknown sender. It's done. But you aren't the only one they were stealing from. Check the second drive. Fay stared at the glowing screen. The victory was hers, the revenge was complete, but as the city's skyline faded in the rearview mirror, she realized the rabbit hole went much deeper than a simple corporate fraud. Ryan, she whispered, her hand hovering over the phone. Don't go home yet. 6 months had passed since the glass walls of Thorne and Associates shattered, and the dust had finally settled into a new, quiet reality. Felicity Fay Mercer sat in her office on the 42nd floor of the Reed Global Headquarters, the silence here a stark contrast to the frantic, toxic hum of her former life. The air smelled of expensive sandalwood, and the faint, crisp scent of a high-end air filtration system. She picked up a heavy, obsidian-weighted fountain pen, feeling its cool surface against her palm. It was a gift from Marcus Reed, a token of appreciation for the forensic audit she'd completed that had saved his firm millions in potential liability. A soft chime echoed through the room. She didn't look up as the door slid open. She knew the rhythm of the footsteps. You're still here, Ryan Halloway said, leaning against the doorframe. He looked different than he had during those late nights in the basement server room. He wore a tailored charcoal suit now, his hair trimmed, the frantic energy of a man hiding a secret replaced by the steady confidence of a head of cybersecurity. The gala starts in an hour, Fay. You're supposed to be the guest of honor. I was just finishing the final report on the second drive, she said, her voice calm and level. She gestured to the slim silver laptop on her desk. It took a while to decrypt the secondary partition Joanna Thorne had hidden behind the offshore server logs. She was thorough, I'll give her that. Ryan walked over, his eyes scanning the screen. And it wasn't just corporate funds, Fay said. She felt a familiar, dull ache in her chest, the only remnant of the woman she used to be. The drive contained the original trust documents from my father. Joanna wasn't just Ashley's mistress and co-conspirator. She was the one who facilitated the legal transfer of my inheritance into a shell company controlled by Eleanor Brown. My mother didn't just look the other way, Ryan. She signed the papers that stripped me of everything before I was even 21. Ryan let out a long, low whistle. So the chill routine wasn't just about keeping the peace. It was about keeping you from ever looking at the books. Exactly, she replied. She closed the laptop with a definitive click. They spent it all. The house, the cars, Ashley's designer wardrobe. It was all bought with money that was meant to be my safety net. They didn't just steal my work, they stole my history. What's the status on Ashley? Ryan asked, his tone shifting to something more cautious. Fay stood and walked to the floor-to-ceiling window. Below, the city was a grid of amber lights, a sprawling machine that didn't care about the rise or fall of individuals. She's working at a laundromat in the East District, a place called Suds and Save. It's a 2-hour bus ride from the studio apartment she shares with 2 other people. I believe the rent is overdue. 6 miles away, Ashley Brown stood behind a cracked plastic counter, the air thick with the smell of scorched lint and cheap detergent. The humidity made her hair frizz, a stark departure from the sleek, professional blowouts she used to flaunt. Her hands, once perfectly manicured, were raw and red from handling industrial chemicals. A customer slammed a bag of damp linens onto the counter, splashing gray water across Ashley's faded polyester uniform. This was supposed to be dry an hour ago, the man barked, his voice vibrating with the same entitlement Ashley once wore like armor. The dryer is broken, she muttered, not meeting his eyes. Her voice was thin, stripped of its former command. "I can give you a voucher for next time." "I don't want a voucher, I want my clothes." Ashley flinched. She looked at her reflection in the glass of a nearby washing machine. Her face was gaunt, her eyes shadowed by a permanent exhaustion that sleep couldn't fix. She remembered the feeling of silk against her skin, the taste of vintage champagne, and the way people used to scramble when she entered a room. Now she was invisible. Worse than invisible, she was a nuisance to be shouted at. She thought of Fay, whose face she had seen on the cover of a business journal in the bodega next door. Fay looked radiant, powerful, and utterly unreachable. The bell above the door chimed, and for a fleeting, delusional second, Ashley hoped it was her mother coming to tell her it was all a mistake. But Alina Brown was currently living in a state-subsidized senior facility, her assets frozen and her reputation in the social circles she craved utterly incinerated. Alina had called Ashley once, 3 weeks ago, crying about the lack of high-quality tea and the unrefined nature of her neighbors. Ashley had hung up. The enabler and the bully had nothing left to offer each other but shared bitterness. Back at the Reed Global office, Marcus Reed entered, looking every bit the titan of industry he was. He stopped beside Fay, looking out at the city. "The board approved the new foundation," Marcus said, his voice deep and resonant. "The Felicity Fay Mercer grant for corporate transparency. It's a good legacy, Fay. You've turned a very dark chapter into something that might actually help people." "Thank you, Marcus," she said. She appreciated the sentiment, but she knew the truth. Justice wasn't always a clean, bright thing. Sometimes it was just the absence of a burden. "You don't look like a woman who just won the biggest corporate settlement of the decade," Marcus noted, his keen eyes observing her profile. "I'm just realizing the cost of the victory," she said softly. She thought of the final meeting she'd had with Alina, just after the second drive's contents were verified. She had gone to the facility, not out of love, but for closure. Alina had sat in a vinyl chair, her hands trembling as she clutched a lukewarm cup of water. "Fay, darling," Alina had said, her voice still trying to find that old, manipulative lilt. "You've had your fun. You've shown us you're the smart one. But surely you aren't going to let your own mother live like this. It's so unchill of you. Think of what people will say." Fay had looked at the woman who had birthed her and realized she felt nothing. No rage, no pity, just a profound sense of distance. "People will say I'm a woman who follows the law, Alina. And the law says you owe the estate $400,000. I've instructed the lawyers not to pursue criminal charges for the forgery, provided you never contact me again. That is the only chill thing I have left to give you." She had walked out then, and she hadn't looked back. "It's time," Ryan said, checking his watch. "The car is downstairs." Fay took a deep breath, the silk of her midnight blue gown rustling as she moved. It was a beautiful dress, one she had bought with her own earned salary, not a penny of it tainted by the fraud of her past. She looked at the laptop on her desk one last time. The second drive was encrypted and locked in the office safe. The secrets were hers now. As they walked toward the elevator, the sound of their footsteps echoed in the hallway, sharp, rhythmic, and purposeful. Fay felt the weight of the evening ahead, the handshakes, the speeches, and the hollow praise of people who only respected her because she had won. She had the corner office, the title, and the wealth that had been stolen from her. She had the loyalty of an ally like Ryan and the respect of a man like Marcus. But as the elevator doors slid shut, reflecting her own composed, solitary image back at her, she felt the silence of the life she had built. She had cut away the rot, but she had been forced to cut away the roots as well. She was thriving, successful, and completely alone in her victory. She adjusted the simple gold band on her finger, her father's ring, the only thing she had managed to recover from the pawn shop Ashley had sold it to. It was cold against her skin. "Are you ready?" Ryan asked as the elevator reached the lobby. Fay Mercer squared her shoulders and stepped out into the flash of the cameras waiting at the entrance. "Yes," she said, her voice a whisper that only she could hear. "I'm ready." The doors opened, the light blinded her for a moment, and she stepped forward into her new world, leaving the ghosts of the Brown family in the shadows where they belonged. The debt was paid, The revenge was complete, and the sleeping lion was finally, perfectly, awake.
I hope you enjoyed this tale. Please subscribe to support the channel. Goodbye for now.